I remember that winter night vividly, the wind howling through every crack of the garage window, where I curled up next to a freezing metal toolbox to sleep. It wasn't the first time my parents tried to teach me a lesson, but it was the first time I realized they no longer saw me as a child worth loving. It all started with a C+ in chemistry. I hadn't even explained my report card when my father roared like thunder. "I told you to study properly. Get out and think about it." My mother just crossed her arms and nodded coldly. I was kicked out near midnight, wearing only a thin shirt and no shoes, as the temperature dipped close to 25 degrees Fahrenheit below freezing. Luckily, the garage wasn't locked. I slipped inside, wrapped myself in a car cover, and shivered through the suffocating scent of motor oil, trying to stop my teeth from chattering. I was 16. Since I was little, I'd taught myself not to cry. Tears only made things worse. In our house, emotions were a luxury, and mistakes were excuses for character building. They called it tough love. I called it systematic cruelty. Their names were Raymond and Carol, true-blooded Americans living in a small suburb in Minnesota. Neighbors called them the disciplined family. Outwardly, they were always smiling, polite, went to church regularly, and kept a perfectly trimmed yard. But behind that ash-gray wooden door, irrational punishments and icy control were the pillars that raised me. Once, I forgot to mow the lawn. Nothing major. It had rained for 2 days and I had a mild fever. But at exactly 3 a.m., my father burst into my room, yelling, "George, downstairs, time to learn a lesson about responsibility." I remember staggering with the mower, shivering under the midnight sky, engine roaring in the dark while he watched sternly from the second-floor window. My mother stood beside him, holding a cup of hot tea. She said nothing, just stared, colder than the night air itself. Another time, I missed the school bus because I stayed up late doing biology homework. My mother was heading the same direction to work, but when I begged for a ride, she pointed to the door and said, "Learn this, no one is obligated to fix your mistakes." I walked nearly 5 miles in a November rainstorm, soaked through, books torn inside my backpack. At dinner, I wasn't allowed to speak unless spoken to. If I accidentally chewed too loudly, my father would tap his fork on the table 3 times. That was the signal. Stand up, wash the dishes, go to your room, in silence. As for birthdays, I remember a small cake when I turned 10, and after that, only cold cards with messages like, "Happy birthday, try harder next year." No gifts, no hugs, not a single "we love you." At school, I tried to be invisible. Never missed a day, never turned in homework late. I knew even a single note home from a teacher meant punishment waiting. I learned to read my father's moods by the way he shut doors. People believe every child has a childhood to cherish. I had fragments I worked hard to forget. But the one moment I could never erase was that night in the garage. When the cold crept into my fingers and my whole body trembled, I had only one thought. If I disappeared tomorrow, would they even notice? No one answered that question. I once believed I just had to survive a few more years, that when I grew up, I'd escape it all. But one day they pushed too far. I didn't just leave the house. I left the past and never looked back. That afternoon, the sun scorched the asphalt on Interstate 29. Heat shimmered off the road, making me dizzy even inside the car. We were driving to visit my cousin in South Dakota. The trip was supposed to take 3 hours, but it stretched to 4 of pure silence and tension. My father blasted country music loud enough to rattle the windows. My mother nagged me for not knowing how to speak respectfully to adults after I accidentally interrupted her at breakfast. I kept my head down, earbuds in, though no music played, just waiting for the hours to pass. When we pulled into a lonely gas station in the middle of nowhere, I didn't have time to ask questions. My father barked, "Get me a bottle of water and some mint gum, now!" I grabbed my wallet and stepped out without a word. The station was run down. An older woman at the counter wiped down a dusty fan. The air reeked of fuel and stale fried food. It took less than 5 minutes to find the water he liked and pay, but when I walked back out, the beat-up gray new Camry was gone. The parking lot was empty. I rushed toward the highway, looking both ways, nothing but blazing heat and wind whipping across cornfields. Then a buzz in my pocket. Text message. From Mom. Let's see how long it takes you to find your way home. Today's lesson? Independence. I froze. Not angry, just numb, standing there like my brain hadn't caught up to reality. 10 minutes later, another message. Don't bother calling. Your dad says lessons only work if you figure them out alone. See you at dinner, if you make it. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. Again, still the same. I sat on the concrete bench outside the gas station, gripping the water bottle until it crackled. No one came back. No one cared where I was. No one in the world except me realized I had just been abandoned in the middle of nowhere. I was 16, and I had just learned something irreversible. I had no home to go back to. Not because I didn't know the address, but because that place had never been one where love or forgiveness lived. The woman from the gas station walked out and handed me a paper bag with some leftover cookies and another small bottle of water. They left you, huh? She asked. Not with pity, but like confirming a fact. I nodded. Bus runs 3 miles that way. Next one's probably in 2 hours. Want to call someone? I checked my phone, battery at 22%. The first person who came to mind was Aunt Angela, my mom's younger sister. Dad had banned me from even saying her name after she gave me a birthday book once. I dialed. 1 ring. 2 rings. George? Her voice, shocked. I'm at McHenry gas station. They left me. I don't know what to do. She paused. It's okay. Stay put. I'll handle everything. You're not going back. Half an hour later, I got a call from a local cab company. Aunt Angela had prepaid for a ride to her home in Nebraska. The driver was a woman in her 40s who asked if I wanted food on the way. I shook my head, resting against the window, letting the wind carry my sighs away. When I stepped onto her porch that night, it was already dark. She hugged me for a long time. No lectures, no demands. Just said, "You're safe now. The rest we'll figure out." That night, I slept in a tiny attic room and didn't jolt awake to slamming doors or raised voices. I didn't say goodbye to my parents, no messages, no tears. I simply closed my eyes and thought, from now on, I'll live like I never belonged there. I arrived in Nebraska early the next morning. Sunlight filtered through the trees lining Aunt Angela's front yard. Her 2-story yellow wooden house wasn't fancy, but to me it felt like a fortress, far from yelling cold stares and life lessons. She opened the door while I was still fumbling with my old backpack. Hugged me tight. No questions, no judgment. Just said, "Come inside, honey. You're cold." Aunt Angela was the only one in the family who ever stood up for me. When I was 13, she mailed me an old flip phone and a leather journal. Both were thrown into the backyard fire pit when my parents found out. After that, they cut off all contact and claimed she poisoned my mind with weakness. But that weakness was the only thing that saved me when the world turned its back. During the first 3 days living with her, I barely spoke. She didn't push, just left a GED prep schedule on the kitchen table and softly asked, "Whenever you're ready, we'll sign up." I nodded. That was the first word I'd said in over 48 hours. We lived modestly. My aunt worked part-time as a nurse at a private clinic, and I got a job bussing tables at a local pizza place. Every evening after my shift, I'd sit at the kitchen table, studying page after page of history, math, and science, while my aunt brewed ginger tea and helped revise my resume. At the time, I had exactly $136 in my wallet, money I had earned all summer at the community pool. I spent it on a new pair of sneakers to replace the ones with torn heels from walking home from the gas station. The rest I saved diligently, recording every cent in the notebook my aunt had given me. Taking the GED wasn't easy, but it wasn't the hardest thing I'd faced either. The real challenge was overcoming the nightly nightmares. My father's booming voice, my mother's cold demand to try harder. Some nights, I woke up thinking I was locked out of the house again. But then I'd see the nightlight she always left on by the table, its soft glow reminding me, this isn't the old place anymore. No one punishes you here. I passed the GED right after turning 17. My aunt hugged me tight as I held the certificate in my hands. We celebrated with 2 hot burgers and a tub of vanilla ice cream from the supermarket's clearance shelf. No cake, no party. But I'd never known happiness that real before. Soon after, I enrolled in a mechanical trade program near home. I didn't want to go to college, not because I wasn't smart, but because I wanted to earn real money as soon as I could. I needed to prove I didn't need any of those hard life lessons to grow up. Within a year and a half, I was trained in repairing construction equipment, welding pipes, and maintaining air compressors. I landed a job at a small company that installed ventilation systems in commercial buildings. The starting pay wasn't high, but it was steady. My aunt told me, "You're doing just fine. Don't rush to compare yourself to anyone else." I continued living with her for a few more years, until I'd saved enough to rent a small apartment in North Omaha. Before I moved out, I left a photo frame on her table. Inside it, my GED certificate, a picture of me in a hard hat at the job site, and a handwritten note. "Thank you. Not because you taught me how to live, but because, for the first time, you let me truly live." I didn't know if my parents remembered me. I didn't care. They once left me on the side of the road. But what they didn't realize was that decision opened a door I had been too afraid to unlock myself. A door out of a prison without bars. And Aunt Angela, she was the one who put the key in my hand. I kept working hard, not for recognition. Deep down, I knew. Some nightmares stop coming back once you've truly stepped into the light. I never imagined I'd become an owner. For someone like me, with no college degree and no backing, starting a company sounded like fantasy. But when you grow up under constant control, you understand how precious it is to make decisions for yourself. I started G&L Mechanical Solutions when I was 27. The L stood for Linda, my Aunt Angela's real name, the woman who gave me my second chance. The company began with just me, one apprentice, and a beat-up pickup truck I bought from a repair shop in Fremont. We took small jobs, installing ventilation in diners, fixing AC units in homes, clearing ductwork in old buildings. No gimmicks, no flashy marketing, just honest work and kept promises. I never used the last name Reynolds again. After moving to Nebraska, I legally changed it to George Allen, my aunt's last name. The only person who ever laid a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're good enough," even if no one else sees it. 10 years passed. I met Megan at an industrial expo in Lincoln. She was an electrical systems engineer, sharp, confident, and incredibly grounded. We started talking about duct layouts, then gradually drifted into life. When I told her about being left behind at a gas station for getting a C+, she didn't laugh. She just squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm glad you didn't let them destroy the good part of you." We got married in a simple ceremony in Aunt Linda's backyard. No one from my family was invited. No one needed to be. My aunt wore a lavender dress and stood beside me in place of my mother. When I handed Megan the ring, my aunt cried, not loudly, but those tears were heavier than all the times she sat silently watching me study by the kitchen table. 2 years later, Elliot was born. A healthy baby boy, brown hair, bright eyes, always smiling. I used to worry I'd become the kind of father I once had. But every time I watched Elliot sleep in Megan's arms, I reminded myself, don't repeat it, not ever. I didn't yell when he spilled milk. I didn't lock his door when he had tantrums. I didn't make him learn in fear. I sat down and asked, "What's bothering you, buddy?" I learned to be a father like I was learning a new language, one no one ever taught me. But that was fine. I had time. I had resolve. And I had a vow in my heart. My child will never feel like a burden. G&L has now grown into 3 branches, each with its own technical team. We provide installation, repairs, and maintenance for hundreds of businesses across the Midwest. I'm not chasing wealth. I just want the people who work with me to know this isn't just a company. It's a fresh start, like the one I was given. I take on interns from youth rehabilitation programs, 18, 19-year-old boys who've stumbled, been labeled hopeless, lived in darkness. I see myself in their eyes, and I give them a beginning, just like Aunt Linda once gave me. I don't speak about my parents. I don't look for them, don't search their names, don't track them online. In my mind, they stopped existing on that summer day at the gas station, not because I hate them, but because I chose to close that door and open another, one that led to something better. Still, life doesn't always let the past stay buried. One late autumn morning, while I was in a meeting with the engineering team about a redevelopment contract in Des Moines, my phone started vibrating nonstop. Not just one call, dozens, 42 missed calls total, and among them, 3 from a name I hadn't seen in 2 decades, Rachel Reynolds. My younger sister, the only one who used to sneak cookies to my door when I got locked out. I stared at the screen, feeling a strange chill. Not fear, not anger, just cold. I didn't pick up. But I knew what I'd buried 20 years ago was clawing its way back, and I was no longer the boy shivering outside the garage door. I left the meeting around 11:30, still running ventilation calculations in my head, when the phone buzzed again. This time, a message. "George, please pick up. It's me, Rachel. Mom's panicking. Dad, he's out of control. I don't know what to do." I froze for a moment, my throat tightening. Not out of sympathy, but because that word, Dad, had lost all meaning for me. Dozens of calls had come from unknown numbers, but those last 3 were from Rachel, the little girl once trapped in the silence of a shattered family. The one who once slipped me bread when I was left outside for breaking a glass. I didn't text back, didn't call, but my hand wouldn't let go of the phone. At 1 p.m., my secretary knocked on the door. A woman named Rachel Reynolds left an urgent message. "She says she's your sister." I nodded slightly and motioned for her to leave. I needed time to think. 20 years without a single word. No letters, no explanations, no apologies. And now suddenly, I was the lifeline for the family that threw me overboard. By late afternoon, I opened my voicemail. The first was Rachel, sniffling, repeating, "Please don't hang up. I know they don't deserve it, but things are really bad." The second, more urgent, "Dad owes hundreds of thousands, Mom's cards are maxed out, the bank's taking the house, they found your company website, they know." The third was full-on sobbing. "They say you owe them your life. They say without their discipline, you wouldn't be successful now." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh? They really believed I succeeded because of the starvation, the isolation, the rain-drenched breakdowns? The final message came from a raspy male voice, probably drunk. "George, you listen to me. Don't act all high and mighty. Without me, you'd be nothing. You think building a company means you can forget where you came from? We're your blood. Got that? Blood. You owe us." I stood up and walked straight out to the office balcony. The crisp fall air carried the smell of rotting wood from the construction site across the street. I pulled out my phone and texted Rachel a single line. "Tomorrow, 7 a.m., River's Edge Cafe, corner table. Come alone." The next morning, I arrived 15 minutes early. I picked a seat by the window and ordered a black coffee. At 5 minutes to 7, Rachel walked in. She wore a light gray sweater, hair tied back, her face thinner than I remembered, but her eyes were the same eyes that used to tremble behind the door when our father screamed me breathless. She sat down and didn't speak for the first few minutes, just twisted a napkin in her hands. I stayed silent too, until she finally looked up, her voice hoarse. "They have nowhere else. Dad owes nearly $200,000. Mom burned through all their savings on expensive shopping, and now she's selling her jewelry just to stay afloat. They're about to lose the house, George. They need you." I stared at her without blinking. "And what about you? What do you want?" Rachel paused for a long time, then whispered, "I didn't come to ask for money. I came because I hope you won't let them hurt you again. But I also can't walk away. They're still my parents, even if I know what they did to you." I took a sip of coffee. It had gone cold, numbing my tongue. "Rachel, there's something you need to understand. They lost the right to call me son the day they sped off from that gas station laughing. You still hope they'll change. I don't. You're my sister, so you still have a choice. But I'm not a backup wallet for the people who buried my childhood under their cruel jokes." I stood up and placed a few bills on the table. "This is the last breakfast we'll share. After today, don't let them come near me." Rachel ran after me as I walked toward the door, grabbing my arm. "George, they're coming to your office. They know the address." I tried to stop them, but Mom, She saw the company's Facebook page. She saved the photo of you and Elliot. They're coming. I didn't turn around. Let them come, I'm ready. I opened the car door and sat behind the wheel, but didn't start the engine right away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Rachel standing there, arms hanging, eyes red. But I knew this was the moment to cut it clean, because some wounds only close when you stop expecting the ones who caused them to heal them. On Monday morning, I had a meeting at 8 a.m. with a subcontractor at our headquarters. But at 7:50, Jenny, the receptionist, called upstairs. Mr. George, there are 2 people here claiming to be your biological parents. They insist on seeing you. I wasn't surprised. I had already briefed our security team after the conversation with Rachel. I told Jenny to let them in, my voice steady. Send them up. I've been expecting them. Through the glass office wall, I watched them enter the hallway. Raymond wore an old brown suit, shoulders sagging, tie crooked. Carol had a faded red scarf around her neck and carried a worn-out knockoff purse. They looked older than I remembered, not just in wrinkles, but in posture and the flicker of panic in their eyes. The door opened. My mother stepped in first, eyes glistening. My boy, oh, George, look at you, successful, grown up. I'm so proud. I didn't stand, didn't extend a hand. I simply gestured to the 2 chairs across from me, voice calm. Sit. Keep it short. I have a schedule. My father didn't speak right away. He glanced around the office, his eyes landed on the photo of me with Megan and Elliot, then settled on the company logo behind me. Finally, he said, heard you're doing well. That's what we always hoped for. I let out a small laugh, no warmth in it. I once hoped to be treated like a son. My mother began crying as if she'd rehearsed this moment. George, we're getting old. What happened in the past was just a misunderstanding, a poorly timed lesson. You shouldn't stay angry over it. I quietly pulled out my phone and put it on speaker. A recording played, raucous laughter, an engine revving, my mother's voice crystal clear. Let's see how long it takes him to find his way home. Their faces froze. My father opened his mouth to interrupt, but I raised a hand, and the next part played. His voice, sharp and unrepentant. Who needs to learn to survive? Let him walk. That's how you grow up. I ended the recording. No one spoke. I've kept that file for 19 years, stored in the oldest phone I ever owned. Not for revenge, but to remind myself I didn't imagine what happened. My father slammed his hand on the table, voice rising. You made it, didn't you? You should be grateful. Without those lessons, I cut him off, eyes locked on his. I succeeded despite you, not because of you. The room hung in thick silence for a few seconds. I opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of documents, and placed them in front of them. I heard you're in trouble with the house on Willow Creek. My mother's eyes lit up. You know, the bank's foreclosing, but if you could help just a bit. I gently slid the papers toward them. No need to worry. I purchased the mortgage last week, under the company's name. It was like pouring a bucket of ice over the room. My mother gaped. My father flushed red and shot to his feet. You're kidding. That house was our blood, sweat, and tears. My voice didn't change. You have 30 days to pack and leave. After that, we'll demolish the property to expand the industrial zone. My mother screamed. George, you can't. That's our home. I stood. No, that was the place where I was discarded, treated like a burden, and told pain was discipline. Now, it's a profitable asset. My father stormed toward the desk, ready to lunge, but the 2 security guards I'd stationed outside stepped in immediately, blocking his path. Leave, I said clearly, and don't ever come back. They were escorted out, eyes full of fury, confusion, and desperation. But I didn't feel satisfaction, just relief, as if a weight I'd carried for 20 years had finally dropped to the floor. I turned around, sat down, and resumed reviewing the construction contract. On my computer screen, the demolition plans for the old residential zone were laid out, with their former home's address at the top. The storm wasn't over yet. But this time, I held the map. 2 days after that meeting, I signed the demolition order for lot number 1456 Willow Creek, the place once known as my family's home. In the files, it was listed as a deteriorating property marked for redevelopment, but to me, it was the final scar that needed to be cut away. I didn't need to be there, but I went anyway. Sitting in the SUV about 200 meters from the construction site gate, I turned on the security camera feed. Every angle had been set to capture the entire event, down to the last second. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it for justice, because if the past stays buried, someone will always believe they can be cruel without consequence. At exactly 8:15 a.m., Raymond and Carol arrived. They wore black, carried a few sagging plastic bags, their eyes lost like people out of place. I knew they didn't believe this day would come. That arrogance, that belief they were untouchable, is what cost them everything. But this time, they were wrong. When security handed over the property ownership transfer papers with my company's name, my mother tore them to shreds in front of everyone and screamed. My son would never go through with this. He's not that kind of man. Her voice was drowned out by the roar of the crane engine starting behind her. The whole block seemed to hold its breath as the sound of steel hit the old shingle roof. Raymond charged at the machine operator, shouting, but was immediately restrained by two guards. Carol collapsed on the curb, clutching her head, sobbing like the world had turned on her. But I knew the truth. They had turned on mine first. Quietly, I pulled out my phone and opened a pre-drafted email titled "Why I Disappeared." Recipients, the entire extended family, both sides, their old church group, even the friend who once urged me to forgive because of blood. Attached was a link to a drive containing every piece of evidence. The audio recording of the office confrontation. Security footage of them being escorted out. A photo of the 2003 text from my mom, "Walk home, don't call," and handwritten birthday cards I kept. Age 14. If you don't accomplish anything worthwhile, don't expect a gift. I hit send and watched the replies flood in by the minute. One aunt wrote, "I can't believe this. I always thought Carol was the perfect mother." An uncle replied with just 2 words, "I'm sorry." Even their old pastor messaged me privately, "The church is open if you need, not to comfort the pain, but to acknowledge the truth." By noon, Raymond and Carol had backed off. Forced to leave the site, they climbed into an old sedan and vanished down the end of the street. One slow-motion camera captured the roof caving in like a documentary reel, bricks tumbling into weeds that once were my mother's garden, boards splintering, dust rising like memory in the air. I wasn't happy, but I could breathe. For 20 years, I'd lived like someone in debt, not to money, but to the validation of what I endured. That debt no longer existed. That night, I sat in my home office as the soft yellow lamp lit Megan's face while she rocked Elliot to sleep. She didn't know I had just ended the hardest chapter of my life. But she understood. Through the quiet intuition only a wife who's walked every invisible wound with you could carry. I opened a new file and titled the folder, "George Allen Housing Project Renewal Plan." The idea was simple. Build affordable homes for single-parent families, especially women and children who had suffered abuse. Each apartment would be modern, safe, with communal spaces, playgrounds, and free weekend skill classes. I reached out to the nonprofit Shelter Hope and initiated a partnership. We would coordinate resident priority lists. I proposed naming the housing complex Linda Haven to honor the only woman who ever reached out to a shivering boy soaked in rain, standing alone outside a garage. I know justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it arrives through decisive, timely actions that don't ask the past for permission. The old house was gone, but from its rotting foundations, something better was beginning. My original plan had been a small resort complex with office space behind Willow Creek, a profitable idea backed unanimously by my 3 financial advisors. But on the night the construction crew finished leveling the foundation, I stood alone on that empty lot, frozen in place. Elliot called just then, asking what seemed like a simple question. "Dad, what are you building there? Will there be space for people who don't have homes?" I looked at the screen, his little face cuddling an old stuffed bear, eyes wide and clear. In that moment, the idea of a luxury resort felt cheap. Not financially, spiritually. Yes, I had won, but I could do more than just win. The next day, I called a full staff meeting. "We're not building the resort. I said firmly. We're building affordable housing for single parents, especially women and kids who've faced abuse. The room went silent. One person furrowed their brow, another sipped their coffee. Someone finally asked, Mr. George, this land could make millions. Are you sure? I nodded. Absolutely. This isn't a business decision. This is how I end the past without letting it wound anyone else. 3 days later, we contacted Hope Bridge Foundation, a nonprofit that supports families after divorce, violence, or financial collapse. Their executive director, Monica Tate, came to meet me personally. She was an older woman with silver hair, a low voice, and seasoned eyes. After I explained the plan, she sat quietly for a moment, then said, "You're the first former victim I've met who chose to build a shelter on the same ground that once hurt them." I smiled gently. I don't want it to stay a place that spreads pain. We named the project Linda Haven, after my aunt, Linda Allen. I chose that name because without her, I might have ended up lost on the margins of society, or worse, become a terrible version of my father. Construction started the following month, 18 apartments, fully equipped. Inside, there would be a community room, a children's play area, a small reading room, and weekend vocational training. I personally wrote letters to every applicant family beginning with, "I once needed a home too. This is my way of giving it back to the world." Each unit would be managed under Hope Bridge supervision, following clear, transparent, and compassionate guidelines. Monica signed a 10-year management agreement stating that no family would be evicted for being a few weeks behind on rent. They would receive financial counseling, legal aid, and a chance to start again. On the day of Linda Haven's grand opening, I stood in the courtyard, watching children run through rows of white-painted houses with blue shingle roofs, flower beds planted by volunteers. Megan held Elliot beside me, her warm gaze saying more than words ever could. Monica stepped up to speak, and when she mentioned me, the whole courtyard went quiet. The founder of Linda Haven isn't a businessman chasing recognition. He was someone left behind. But instead of returning hate, he built hope, so others wouldn't have to go through what he did. I'm not good at speeches, but when I held the mic, I said one thing. The day I got left at the gas station, I didn't think anyone would come back for me. Today, I hope this becomes a place for people who've ever felt the same. After the event, I sat alone on a stone bench under the newly planted trees. The breeze carried the laughter of children, the chirping of sparrows, and the faint sound of a new chapter just beginning. I had just wrapped up a planning meeting with Hope Bridge about expanding Linda Haven onto the adjacent lot when Jenny knocked again. She hesitated slightly before speaking. "They're back, Raymond and Carol." I leaned back in my chair and took a quiet breath. I knew they'd return. People like my parents never accept losing everything without trying to claw back one last piece. But I also knew, this time, they weren't facing the same timid boy from 20 years ago. I allowed them in without interrupting Jenny. The main conference room was fully lit, curtains drawn back, internal cameras already recording. Raymond looked more worn than before. Patchy stubble, a wrinkled shirt. Carol had lost all her usual poise, her gray hair tied up messily, lips trembling with each breath. They walked in like shadows. "George, please, just give us one chance. I'm begging you." Carol's voice cracked, tears falling almost as soon as she spoke. Raymond looked at me, the fire once in his eyes now reduced to exhaustion. "We're family. You can't turn your back on your own parents." I looked at them, slowly opened the drawer, and pulled out a thin file. I placed it on the table and slid it toward them. "Rental application, unit number 7 at Linda Haven. If you want it, fill out everything and return it by the 15th. They exchanged stunned glances. Rent a place?" My mother stammered. I nodded, just like anyone else. "Credit check required, proof of income if available, and 2 personal references, not relatives." Raymond gritted his teeth, clinging to a shred of pride. "We're your flesh and blood. How can you treat us like strangers?" I didn't back down. "No, I'm treating you fairly, the way you never did with me." No one spoke after that. Only an awkward, stifling silence filled the room. When they left, Carol still clutched the application form in her hand. Raymond didn't look back once. 3 days later, I received a rental application from an unfamiliar email address. No income documents, no references, just a few rushed lines scribbled in smudged blue ink. The application, of course, was denied. The next morning, as I stepped out of the elevator, a security guard stopped me. Someone set up a tent outside the north gate. It's the Reynoldses. I didn't react right away. I simply told them to contact a local shelter for temporary assistance, but added, "Don't let them inside the property. Linda Haven is a place for healing, not where trauma repeats itself." That afternoon, I prepared for an event I had planned for months, live streaming the demolition of the old house foundation at Willow Creek. The final remains, concrete basement walls, and a stairwell where I'd once been locked for countless nights. Before I left the office, Megan placed her hand on my shoulder. "Are you sure you want to do this publicly?" I turned to her. "I don't need revenge. I need the truth to be seen." At 9 a.m., the live stream began. Over 2,000 viewers tuned in, including former classmates, neighbors, distant relatives, and even complete strangers who had never heard my name. The camera panned slowly, capturing the excavator scooping up the final blocks of concrete. The sound of crumbling bricks echoed steadily. In a few moments, I saw flashes of my childhood behind those steps. Thin blankets, cold soup cans, eyes wet from the cold. When the last layer was broken down, I muted my mic and closed the phone. Standing there, alone, on a lot now free from every trace of the past, I didn't feel relieved. I felt complete. That evening, Rachel called. "They're blaming me, saying I betrayed them by telling you where you lived." "I'm sorry." I was quiet for a moment. "You don't need to apologize. Because of you, I got to choose how this ended." We spoke for a few more minutes, then said goodbye. I didn't know where Raymond and Carol would go, but I knew this. I was no longer the boy left on the roadside, desperately dialing a cold, empty house. I was no longer the boy left behind. I was a father, a husband, and a man who ended the pain without ever echoing it. George didn't chase revenge. He built renewal. From being discarded and broken, he forged a life of compassion, not just for himself, but for others who had been silenced like him. Forgiveness was never spoken, but justice was served. His journey shows that sometimes quiet resolve is the loudest answer. What do you think of George's choice? Can justice truly replace forgiveness? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional, thought-provoking stories about family and life.